Hi, everybody. I have a nurse whistleblower with me today. I'm going to call her Jay for obvious reasons. She has her camera turned off. Jay, what's been going on? You have some information in writing, some stuff that you've been speaking to your bosses around. Can you tell us, you work for the NHS as a nurse. Can you just give us a little background? 25 years you've been a nurse?
Yeah, I've been a student nurse and qualified nurse for 21 years, like 27 years in the NHS altogether.
And you work on which department do you work in?
Well, I work in women's health.
Okay.
And I was recently asked to give this jibby jab to pregnant ladies. And I said, you mean sign them up for a clinical trial? No, just arrange their appointments and follow them up and remind them and make sure they attend for this appointment. We need to get as many pregnant women vaccinated as possible. So I said, okay, if you can answer these questions. I have some questions about the safety. You keep saying it's safe and effective. So I asked a lot of questions in writing, about 10 questions in writing. Like, will it affect the placenta? Will protein be excreted? And because protein in pregnancy is serious, clotting in pregnancy is more common. And these clots are associated with clotting. Would it cause an issue? And I got a response saying, we're not qualified to answer your questions. We just want you to trust the experts. And could you stop asking questions and stop doing any further research into this area, because you're making yourself mentally unwell and giving yourself anxiety.
Wow. So you asking for proof of what was going on, wanting to research, asking them what was going to happen, and they basically silenced you.
Absolutely.
Telling
and ignored
mental health issues.
Yes. So I'm an unwell person who doesn't think the same as everybody else. So therefore there's something wrong with me, and they're correct, but they can't show me why they're correct.
Wow. And so, did you say that you used to work within the nursing community, sort of putting forward questions and being somebody who had that status of?
Well, as a nurse from day one, they said, don't do anything that's not based on evidence and research, and question everything. Don't just be a robot and do as you're told. You must question everything, because people's safety is at stake. So when I've implemented it, some 22 years later, I've been told, don't ask questions and don't do research, which is the complete opposite of my last 20 years experience. So and now it's total silence. It's like not mentioned. We don't mention it. It's very bizarre.
And do your colleagues feel the same, or are they just going along with it all?
It seems the majority are just going along with it all, because
so they don't ask questions. They want to go to Benidorm. Yeah,
they want to go to Benidorm. They want to just pay their mortgage, feed their kids, and go home. It's very strange, but I have heard stories from my colleagues to say that there are consultants out there saying, well, the party line is that you should have it, but in my opinion, we don't have enough evidence. But that's done covertly rather than overtly, where I was overtly asking questions and demanding and stating facts, and I've been told not to state the facts because it gives my colleagues anxiety that they're taking drugs from renowned criminals. And these are health professionals, but it gives them anxiety for me to tell them about it. So I'm not allowed to discuss any of the background with my colleagues. I'm not allowed to ask my superiors questions, and I'm to stop doing any research because it's for my own good, my own well-being.
This is really interesting, because I have family and ex-friends who are in that state of anxiety because they don't know, but they don't want to know. But we're talking here about medical professionals who are administrating these drugs and this jib jab
and promoting.
Were you asked to give the jib jab?
Yes, I was asked to give it to my colleagues initially, after I'd already made myself quite clear on the matter that I would not be administrating this new technology to anybody that I knew. I wouldn't give it to a stranger, let alone anybody that I knew. And I most certainly wouldn't give it to vulnerable people such as pregnant women or children, where there was no studies at all, let alone long-term studies. We've got no fertility studies, we've got no medicinal interaction studies, we've got no studies with people with long-term conditions. The studies by Pfizer were somewhat controversial. They don't meet the standards that research should. I mean, it was a blinded trial.
What's your opinion, impression of when we were in pandemic? Were the hospitals full? Were the nurses, and I know a lot of people are saying that nurses are rushed off their feet. What was going on? Have you seen?
Well, there was a percentage, it must have been about 10 to 15% that were not allowed to come to work for shielding. And then there was a good percentage of people who'd come in contact. It was like a merry-go-round of people going home for 10 days of contact, even though they were perfectly well. Sick people were turning up to work, they tested negative, but healthy people who tested positive were going home. But most of the services were stopped. The only place where it really continued was women's health, where I'm based, and that because you can't delay elective surgeries there. So most nurses in the general side, a lot were redeployed to manned screening programs, swabbing, track and tracing, lots of different roles, because your surgical wards were empty. So there was no bank shifts available. They had a lot of nurses on duty, but they were practicing TikTok routines.
I actually had a client who sadly has passed away now, Jay. She was 80, one of my Pilates clients, and she had a stroke last year. And when I contacted her, she'd been moved to an empty ward and was having a great time because she'd tested positive for COVID, and she was the only one in the ward.
It's reversed now. So the COVID patients are in the base, in the general side, and people who test negative tend to be in the side rooms, which is, everything is about face to what infection prevention is, and the pandemic response plan hasn't been adhered to. So it's
so why has the pandemic stuff not been adhered to?
Well, we've never locked down the healthy. We had a system in place that if we had a pandemic of the flu, that these certain steps would be taken, and none of the steps were taken. We started following the Chinese method of controlling a virus, which you can't control a virus anyway, and it was a complete deviation from everything we'd prepared for.
So what had you prepared for, Jay?
Well, we expect a massive flu outbreak every 40 years or so. And the last one was Spanish flu 100 years ago. So we plan to have distribution of PPE for staff on the wards, but that wasn't in place. We prepare to send elderly people to intermediate, so when they're discharged from hospital, they don't go straight back into care homes, infect everybody else. But that's exactly what they did. It just didn't follow at all what common sense would have you do. And there's still no plan. So they're saying that the NHS is going to be overwhelmed this year, but where's the plan to discharge the elderly people from care homes into a safe area and not send them back to the residential home that they came from, that's going to infect the rest of the residents? So most of the care home people who suffered were caught this off other residents discharged directly from a hospital to the care home without being tested. So it was a complete farce on how to manage.
And did your colleagues, are your colleagues aware of this farce, or as you say, they just don't want to know? They just don't want, they just follow along, keeping quiet and not speaking out. And
most don't want to have anything. Most people, even those that seem well embedded in the narrative and very high up in the system, just they say, yes, I know that doesn't make sense, but do it anyway. That is all we hear day in, day out. It happens every handover we've had. It's like, we're doing this today, and everybody, even those who are on their third jab, they're like, but that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. But they just will still go through. We'll do it anyway because we need the job. We need to pay our mortgages.
So you're willing to lose your job if need be next year because you don't want to have it?
Well, we've been threatened to be sacked in April, so they're going to have to sack me. I will not make their lives easy and leave for them, which they either want a surge in uptake from the threat, which isn't compliant with the Nuremberg principles, because that's coercion.
Yeah.
So, or they want you to leave, so then you've got no recourse back to them. So the only way to deal with this is actually to get sacked and then take legal action afterwards.
Yeah. So to sum up, you've got it in writing. You have been told not to ask questions, not to do any more research, not to speak to people, and just to do as you're told.
Yeah, basically. And I've just it's not allowed to be mentioned. I'm not allowed to talk about it. I'm not allowed to discuss it with colleagues. I'm not to be retrained in any way. I'm not to be re-educated. There's no way that they can show me.
You've been told that you've got to do everything that you were told not to do as a nurse, and you're not allowed to say any more about it. And if you do,
basically, I didn't find out what the if was, but that may come. That may come. So
yeah, I really appreciate your time and courage.
Absolute pleasure.
For speaking out, and we need more of you. I know it's happening all over the world every day now, and
fingers crossed.
I really appreciate your sharing. It's of very great value to humanity to speak out and to speak the truth, so that we can really put an end to this very frightening tyranny that is happening.
Anything to help.
Thanks, my sweetheart. Lots of love.
Thank you. Love you too. Bye.